It's not that big a deal. I can just. Yeah, it's not that big a deal.
Zack Fleming. Yep.
It is 3. Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for coming to the Martinsville-Henry County Historical Society's Heritage Center and Museum. Anybody here who's here for the first time? Welcome in, and I see we have a lot of regulars. I'm Holly Kozelski. I'm the new executive director of the museum. I've been here since October. I'm here to oversee and to help with the local history museum, which is downstairs. And there's a significant expansion, 13,000 square feet, that will house antiques collections of national significance. They're antiques of tools, firearms, Native American artifacts, model trains, antique toys, steam engines, and much more. So we have a lot to look forward to and a lot coming, a big growth coming up. Today, Zack Fleming is here to talk about, as you know, the maps of Thomas Jefferson. How many of you have been to Monticello? How many of you plan to go back? There's so much to see. It's too much for one day. How many here are members of the Martinsville-Henry County Historical Society? We appreciate that. That's a significant part of keeping our work going. We have new exhibits coming up, a timeline of our local history, and we're also working on a new, modern, interactive, and complete website. So we look forward to that, and we appreciate having you along with us as we make this expansion. We'll let Zack take over. Look forward to your program. Thank you, Zack.
Good afternoon. My name is Zack Fleming. I'm a civil affairs specialist in the Army Reserves. I'm a former teacher with Henry County Public Schools. I guess I can still call myself a cartographer, though I don't really make a whole lot of maps anymore. I spend the majority of my time making educational geography videos on YouTube, which is my full-time job. So on my channel I make a lot of general geography videos. A lot of them are really just random videos or videos of random geography facts. But my favorite videos to make are my historical map videos, especially those from the age of exploration or have to do with exploration, and from the colonial era in the Americas. I really like historical maps, specifically because to me it kind of combines geography, history, and art all into one. And it's also a lot of fun looking at primary sources, just because you can see and imagine the world as someone would have during that time period. So today's presentation is on the maps of Thomas Jefferson. I don't think Thomas Jefferson really needs much of an introduction. Third U.S. president, second governor of Virginia, writer of the Declaration of Independence. But today, I kind of want to, present or introduce a side of Thomas Jefferson that's not as talked about, and that is his interest in cartography and geography. And like I said, I feel that this side is a little bit overlooked, and that's part of why I chose to give a presentation on him. Also, a lot of the maps that I've studied over like the last couple of years, I realized that they all kind of had a connection, and it was Thomas Jefferson. Either he had created it, had oversaw its creation, or his father had created it, or one of those maps have been used as a source. So Thomas Jefferson was obviously a man of the Enlightenment. I really like Stephen Ambrose's quote. If you know Stephen Ambrose, he wrote Undaunted Courage about Lewis and Clark's expedition, one of my favorite books of all time. He's also the author of Band of Brothers. And he said he was a man dedicated to collecting facts and then putting the new knowledge to work for the good of mankind. So among the knowledge he was most interested in collecting was geographic. Jefferson's library at Monticello was the most extensive in the world on the subject of geography of the North American continent, even before he was the President of the United States. So Thomas Jefferson learned surveying and cartography and just his general appreciation and interest in geography from his father, Peter Jefferson. So Peter Jefferson arguably created one of the most important maps during the colonial era, and certainly to Virginia. But before I go too deep into this map, I kind of need to give a little bit of context, and I apologize if you've heard this part of the presentation before. This tends to be the foundation for a lot of the presentations that I've given. But I think it's important when talking about Peter Jefferson's map. So in the early 18th century, a lot of people didn't really know where the borders between Virginia and the Carolinas were, which is a little bit weird because there actually was a charter in 1695 that defined the border, but it hadn't been surveyed yet. So this map is from 1720, and you can see Virginia in the pink there, and then Carolina in the green there. So people were just kind of guessing where it was at. No one really knew. So this created a bit of a problem because people just that lived near the border were getting away without paying taxes because they would just say that they lived in the other colony. And so the two colonies, recognizing the problem, they put together a survey team in 1710 to draw the border, but there was a creek that was mentioned in the charter, and the two sides couldn't agree on where this creek actually was, and so they never really got started. And in 1728, another party was put together, and this one was actually successful. They went all the way to the border, or the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in modern-day Patrick County. William Byrd II, who later founded Virginia's capital of Richmond, he brought attention to another reason why the colonies felt that the border issue needed to be resolved. He said that formerly enslaved people were escaping into this area because it was unclear which colony had jurisdiction. So in his journal that he kept on the expedition, he wrote this. He said, "We came upon a family of mulattoes that called themselves free, though by the shyness of the master of the house, who took care to keep the least in sight, their freedom seemed a little bit doubtful. It is certain many slaves shelter in this obscure part of the world." And so right here is the map that came from that expedition. At the top is the full map, and at the bottom you can see what is essentially modern-day Martinsville and Henry County, and Patrick County over there to the west. So the Irvine was named after a professor that helped train him for the expedition, which is now the Smith River. There was a little bit of confusion on the Dan River and the branches of the Mayo. That probably could have been fixed. Mayo wanted to go further south. William Byrd told him that wasn't a good idea, and he wouldn't let him do it because he said that this is where the northern Indians attacked the southern Indians, and he was afraid that some sort of disaster would end up happening. So slightly off topic, but you can visit a place that was also mentioned in the journal in Mayo State Park. It's like a 1.5-mile hike. Byrd said, "Beyond that, the line intersected another river that seemed to be a branch of the Irvine, to which we gave the name of the Mayo, in compliment to the other of our surveyors. It was about 50 yards wide where we forded it, being just below a ledge of rocks which reach across the river and made a natural cascade." So anyway, settlers kept moving west, and very quickly. It wasn't long before the colonies needed to extend that border. And this is where Peter Jefferson comes in. So Thomas Jefferson himself can kind of tell this part of the story. He said, or he wrote, "My father's education had been quite neglected, but being of a strong mind, sound judgment, and eager after information, he read much and improved himself insomuch that he was chosen with Joshua Fry, professor of mathematics at William and Mary College, to continue the boundary line between Virginia and North Carolina, and was afterwards employed with the same Mr. Fry to make the first map of Virginia which had ever been made, that of Captain Smith being merely a conjectural sketch." So, slightly off topic, but he mentions the John Smith map not being the first map. I feel like Thomas Jefferson might have been a bit biased there, because the John Smith map is quite impressive, and I would still consider it the first map of Virginia. This isn't it. This is just to show the route that John Smith took in the summer of 1609. This is what he's referring to as 1612 map that I'm about to show you. So John Smith took a couple expeditions in the summer to collect information for his map, and then this was the result of it. So it might look a little bit weird. You kind of have to turn your head sideways. North is pointing this way. That's why they have the ship. It's like you're in England and you're sailing towards Virginia. So you can see the Chesapeake region, or the Chesapeake Bay. This is, of course, it doesn't really cover western Virginia. This is really just the eastern. You could even say this is really just Powhatan territory. So it doesn't cover all of Virginia, but it's quite detailed. I won't go too into detail because it's a little bit outside of the scope of this presentation. But I brought a Dutch copy of this that was made sometime between 1630 and 1640. I brought a copy of it if you want to look at it after and ask me any questions or anything. The red dots that I put there, those were crosses for how far John Smith explored himself. Anything after those red dots, the Indians had told him what was there. So on this one, all the blue dots there, those are tribes. So it's quite detailed. Yeah, I think Jefferson might have been slightly biased on that one. It's so detailed that you can identify details where some towns and major cities are now located. So back to the Peter Jefferson map. So the continuation of the boundary line occurred in 1749, and the stories of Jefferson and Fry's adventure were passed down through his family. His great-granddaughter, Sarah Randolph, wrote this: "Colonel Jefferson and his companions had often to defend themselves against the attacks of wild beasts during the day, and at night found but a broken rest, sleeping as they were obliged to do for safety, in trees. Jefferson's courage did not once flag, but living upon raw flesh, or whatever could be found to sustain life, he pressed on and persevered until his task was accomplished." So as Thomas Jefferson stated, Joshua Fry and Peter Jefferson were employed to make a map soon after. Their employer was the acting governor of Virginia, Lewis Burwell. Colonial governors had been directed by George Montague Dunk, the second Earl of Halifax, who was the president of the Board of Trade and Plantations, to conduct a thorough survey of their colonies and send him their best maps. And this map was their finished product that they sent him. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at it. So again, this is surrounding area, Martinsville, Henry County. He did correct the prior map with the Dan River and the Mayo River mix-up. I'm not exactly sure where he got the information. I don't know if he saw this with his own eyes or had another source, because he would have, we know that he started a survey in what is Patrick County. So maybe he did come here first and get that information, or got it from somebody else, but it has been corrected. Chestnut Knob was called Wart Mountain, and that was named by William Byrd. It just wasn't on his map. He named it Wart Mountain because he said it simply looked like a wart. And Reedy Creek is now Reed Creek, and this is also the first map that shows the Great Wagon Road. or the first published map that shows the Great Wagon Road, which is like a semi-improved colonial road that went from Pennsylvania all the way down to Georgia. So you might not be able to see it, but over here on the left, let's see if my little clicker here works. You can see a red line right here. This entire area belonged to, what's his name? It was called the Fairfax Grant. It belonged to Thomas Fairfax, 6th Lord Fairfax of Cameron. So Jefferson and Fry, before doing the Virginia-North Carolina line, they had actually surveyed this border right here. It's 77 miles long, going from the source of the Potomac River to the source of the Rappahannock River. And this line was surveyed 3 years prior to the Virginia-North Carolina border. This is also the first map to accurately depict, or semi-accurately depict, the Blue Ridge Mountains. So this ridge right here is the Blue Ridge Mountains. And I get this question a lot about the style of the mountains here. You know, in the Appalachian Mountains, you do see kind of like perfectly straight ridge lines for the most part. It looks a little bit different than the Rocky Mountains, which are a little bit more sporadic. But the style of, or the shape of the Appalachian Mountains influenced later cartographers that were getting secondhand information about the Rockies. They just assumed that it was very similar to the Appalachian Mountains. So a lot of times the Rocky Mountains would be depicted with these straight ridge lines. So the manuscript maps were made in 1751, and they were given to a man named Thomas Jefferson for engraving. The finished product was in 1753. Multiple states of the map were published, and then the final in 1775. It was also simplified into one-sheet versions published in French, which had 5 states of its own. I brought with me today an original French copy back here, which I've given to the museum, and you can take a look at that after the presentation. So the Jefferson-Fry map went on to be the source of many, many other maps. And the most notable of which is this map right here. This is the John Mitchell map. John Mitchell was a doctor in Virginia. Well, he was born in Virginia. He went to Scotland to study at the University of Edinburgh, and then he came back to Virginia and he opened a practice at Urbana, Virginia. And him and his wife had some health problems, and he thought if they moved back to England that maybe their conditions would improve. And he had a lot of interests outside of medicine, and one of them was cartography. So he created a map of North America. I'm not sure if it still exists. It was a manuscript map, but it's been documented that he presented this to the same man mentioned earlier, the second Earl of Halifax. He presented it to him, and he said that he really likes this map, but I think you could do a better job if I could get you better sources. And so he told the colonial governors, you know, I need some better maps, and that's how the Jefferson-Fry map ended up being created. So Lawrence Martin, chief of the Library of Congress Map Division from 1924 to 1946, he called the John Mitchell map the most important map in American history. So it's the most important map for really a couple of reasons. One is the second Earl of Halifax kind of used it as propaganda. He was showing a lot of territory belonging to the British when it was disputed the territory with the French, and he showed all these French forts that looked like they were in British territory. So it looked like the French were encroaching on the British, and some people cite that map as one of the reasons that the French and Indian War occurred. And the other reason that it's considered the most important map in American history is this is the map that was used by the British, the Americans, and the Spanish. The Spanish used a French copy at the Treaty of Paris in 1783 at the conclusion of the American Revolutionary War to decide the borders that would become the United States. For the British one, there's a bit of speculation because on the British one, they had drawn a large red line across the top of the map. way farther north than what our current borders are. And people have speculated, of course we didn't find out about this map until a few centuries later, that line was actually how much land they were willing to give up, and that the Americans asked for significantly less than what they were willing to. So it would make sense why they would just kind of hide that in the archives and just not bring it up. So if you want to see a real life copy of this, the town of Urbana, Virginia, they ended up purchasing one, don't quote me on this, I want to say like 20, 30 years ago, for maybe like $20,000 or $30,000, and fixed it up, and they've got it in their visitor center. Now, like the cheapest one you can find is like $125,000 is the cheapest I've seen. So these maps go for a lot because it is such an important part of American history, and it's really, really large, 75 by 55 inches. So the following year, 1784, Thomas Jefferson was appointed as the minister to France, and while he's in Paris, he improved upon his father's map. He made this map to accompany the book, the only book that he ever wrote in his lifetime, Notes on the State of Virginia. And of course, Jefferson used his father's map as a source, and he used a few other sources for the surrounding states and the western parts of Virginia. So one of the sources that he wanted to use, but he couldn't get his hands on, was John Henry's 1770 map for its information on counties. So John Henry is the father of Patrick Henry. So John Henry's map was an attempted improvement on the Friar Jefferson map. You can probably tell how similar it looks. He used it as a source. He asked the Virginia government for funds to improve it, but they said no. He tried to raise money from the public on some sort of like subscription program where he would make newer versions, but he ran out of money, which was unfortunate because one of the things that he wanted to do was to measure the roads in Virginia so he could put roads on the map, which I think would have been really cool to see all these years later, a map from 1770 that has Virginia's roads on it. So it is a little bit disappointing. It ended up essentially being a financial failure. Virginians did not consider it to be superior to the Friar Jefferson map, and eventually he signed over the rights to his son Patrick Henry, and then Patrick Henry took care of him financially in his later years in life. So Thomas Jefferson made some of his own interesting additions to the geography of the region. He proposed 3 new states. You might not be able to see it, but he writes the words new state, a new state, a new state, and then down here, this is eastern Tennessee. He proposes the state of Franklin, which is named after Benjamin Franklin. So a little over a decade after publishing his map, Jefferson, of course, became president. And while president, he oversaw 5 major expeditions, all of which came back with new geographic information to most, and it was presented on maps, which would influence American cartography for decades. Jefferson directed one of his expedition leaders, William Dunbar, to, quote, delineate with correctness the great arteries of this country, so those who come after us will extend the ramifications as they become acquainted with them and fill up the canvas we begin. So this was one of the goals for all of Jefferson's expeditions. These expeditions included the Hunter-Dunbar expedition of 1804. This was an expedition that was sent to explore the Washita River. The Red River expedition in 1806, that's a typo there. This expedition was led by Thomas Freeman and Peter Custis, who explored the Red River in the Louisiana Territory. 2 expeditions by Zebulon Pike, one from 1805 to 1806, to the upper reaches of the Mississippi River, and a second as soon as he got back. This time he was sent deep into the west to try to locate the headwaters of the Red and the Arkansas rivers, and he returned in July of 1807. You might have heard of Pike's Peak. It's named after him, And this is its first depiction right here on the right, and you can see it right here. And then, of course, the most famous of the expeditions, the Lewis and Clark expedition from 1804 to 1806. They were tasked with a similar mission, except this time going up the Missouri River, and also with the goal of finding a route to the Pacific Ocean. Now, Jefferson told Congress that this was to look primarily to look for economic opportunities. Otherwise, Congress was not going to fund it. But Jefferson had also had scientific and geographic discovery in mind. And he had Lewis trained for this. He sent Meriwether Lewis to different experts in different areas. And this was also kind of a selling point for when Meriwether Lewis wanted William Clark to be a co-captain. Jefferson didn't necessarily agree with his decision or want to do that. He thought there was a possibility they might get in an argument. And on paper they weren't co-captains, but William Clark was a trained cartographer, and so this was a bit of a selling point for Jefferson's approval. So there's a bit of a common misconception that Lewis and Clark were going into completely uncharted territory to Europeans, but that wasn't exactly the case. They did make a lot of new discoveries and improved upon the geographic understanding of the region, but they left with a good understanding of the geography before they left. And this was thanks to Native Americans, French and Spanish traders. So Jefferson directed a man named Nicholas King, who was his unofficial, Thomas Jefferson's unofficial cartographer, to create a map for Lewis and Clark before they set out. And he used multiple sources to make it. This is the map right here. This isn't the only map that they took, but this is probably one of the best examples. So one of the sources that he used for the map was this one right here, made in 1804 by Aaron Arrowsmith. Some would say that this is kind of symbolic to manifest destiny to an extent. Simply because almost everything out west is erased when there's tons of Native Americans and towns and villages, and even some mapping that had been done, but it's pretty much left like a blank canvas. However, he does leave a couple features. The Rocky Mountains are drawn in a straight line, and you can't really see it. You might be able to see it a little bit. There's some tributaries to the Missouri River there. And so these tributaries were drawn by a Blackfoot Indian named Akumaki, and he drew this in the snow for an employee of the Hudson's Bay Company, Peter Fiddler, who took this information, and it eventually found its way on published maps. And this is just one map from many that was used as a source. I did bring with me today, over here as well, a simplified, an original simplified version of this Aaron Arrowsmith map, and it does show the tributaries right here. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Lewis and Clark map today, partly because it had such a big influence, but also Thomas Jefferson ultimately oversaw its creation. He even wrote a paragraph in the book that the map came in, and this is what he wrote. It was the intention of Lewis and Clark to publish their journal soon after their return from their expedition, and Lewis went so far as to issue a prospectus of the work, announcing its speedy publication. They both, not long after this, received government appointments, which prevented the carrying out of this plan. Urged by Jefferson to proceed with the work, Lewis started for Washington to take up his editorial task when he lost his life on the journey. Clark, the survivor, prompted by Jefferson to seek an editor for the work, selected Nicholas Biddle, who, after some hesitation, engaged to take it up, giving himself almost completely to the task. So I just wanted to dive in for a second and look at some of the features. Some of these maps, you could look at them all day and find all kinds of cool stuff. So I had to kind of be selective on what I put up here. In the top left, we've got Floyd's River and Floyd's Grave. Now, like all of these place names that I'm showing you here, and most of them that are on the map are still there. I mean, some of the names were changed over time, but a lot of them are still there, which I think also kind of shows, Thomas Jefferson's lasting impact on the geography of the country. So Floyd's River, Floyd's Grave. So Sergeant Charles Floyd, he was the only death on the expedition, which is quite remarkable considering it was like over a 2-year expedition, thousands of miles, around 30 members, and he died from what is thought to be appendicitis. And then in the middle here is really the main reason that Congress was funding this for economic purposes. It says, between these rivers, the different bands of Sioux meet every spring to trade with each other and the white traders who visit them. And then over on the right, we've got Sacagawea River. Now, Sacagawea, it's a little bit of a common misconception that she was a guide. She did guide a little bit in the Bitterroot Mountains because she was from the area and she had been kidnapped when she was a child. But she did make some pretty important contributions to the expedition. One being a boat flipped over, and all of the notes and the documents and everything that Meriwether Lewis and Clark had written down fell into the river, and she acted fast and jumped in the river and grabbed all the documents. They were apparently in some sort of waterproof bag, but she was able to grab all the documents, or grab most of the documents. And so had she not done that, then the expedition would have essentially been for nothing, because they would have lost all the information. Maybe they could have done some of it by memory, but it would not have been as precise as it was. So I probably would not be talking about this map right now had she not jumped in. And because she did that, Lewis cited in his journal that he named this river after her because of that act. Then we've got Jefferson's River, which of course is named after Thomas Jefferson. Pompey's Tower, which is named after Sacagawea's son. And then over here, we've got, you can't really see it, but I've kind of labeled it there, that red line. That was the path of John Coulter. That wasn't actually during the expedition, but he was a member of the expedition. When they got back to St. Louis, this is why he's considered like the first mountain man, he wanted to go back out. And so he left with some other traders, and then he went on his own little side quest into what is Yellowstone National Park and Grand Teton National Park, and he's believed to be the first Anglo-American or Anglo-European to do so. He saw some geysers and geothermal activity, and he told people about this, and people thought he was lying. And so the area became known as Coulter's Hell, and it was labeled on this map as Coulter's Hell. Turns out he was telling the truth. And then I've labeled, shown the longitude. So at the top of this map and at the bottom of this map, it shows west from London and then west from Washington, D.C. So today we think about the prime meridian being in Greenwich, but at the time it hadn't been established yet. I don't think it was till like 1885 that Greenwich had been established, and so it was kind of a point of a national pride to use your own prime meridian. And Jefferson was the one that pushed for it in Washington, D.C. So if you go up to the Washington Monument, there's a stone called Jefferson's Pier. So Jefferson had really pushed for the prime meridian in Washington, D.C., and he really wanted like that to be the prime meridian, that the entire world uses, but Greenwich ended up winning out. So there would be readers in both England and in the United States, and so they chose to put both prime meridians there. So this is actually my last slide here. I wanted to end with this quote by Thomas Jefferson. It is impossible not to look forward to distant times when our rapid multiplication will expand itself beyond those limits and cover the whole northern, if not the southern continent. So, good, bad, either way, that's his goal and his mission. essentially played out, maybe with the exception of the southern continent. And a lot of that was because of his interest in geography, his interest in maps, and his cartography was motivated by that mission. I would say that's how that ended up playing out. So if you're interested in this topic, I go even more in depth on most of the maps that you just saw on my YouTube channel. I've got one on John Smith's map of Virginia. The John Mitchell map, I have almost a 10-minute video just on that map. A lot of the information I talked about today came from the Thomas Jefferson, was a geography geek. Y'all have basically already watched that video at this point. And then I've got 2 videos on Lewis and Clark. One on the map that I just showed you, shows a lot more details about the map, and then another entire video dedicated to the sources used before they went on the expedition. But I've got a lot of other videos that don't necessarily relate. I've got a few videos coming out soon that I'm excited about. One is on the island of California. People used to think California was an island. Some people wish that it was an island now. But for hundreds of years, it was drawn as an island on maps. And then, what's that?
Wishful thinking.
Yeah, I get that comment a lot when I've posted pictures of it, and I'm sure I'll get tons of comments when I actually post the video. And I've got another one coming out here soon on was one of the people that sponsor my videos. They had recently discovered at an auction a map that was significantly older than what it was listed as, and they paid like $250,000 for it, and now it's up for sale for $7.6 million. And it hasn't got any really attention yet, because it was just recently rediscovered last December, and they spent the last year studying it to confirm before they put it on the market. So I'm excited to get that video out, just because it hasn't got any attention, and it's cool to be one of the first to get to share this new map. So yeah, check it out. Just hit 250,000 subscribers, hoping to hit maybe 1 million next year. I don't know, we'll see. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
These maps were not commonly distributed in the country, I'm sure. What did people use when they were migrating out west? Old, discarded maps, or I would think these would be very, very expensive, both to make and to own one.
Yeah, so some of them had like thousands that were reproduced. Now, like some, like the manuscript map, there's only one. I think a lot of people that were going out west were already using, kind of going based off paths that had been used. Now, a lot of these maps too, like the Lewis and Clark map, you honestly probably couldn't use it much for navigation, especially like as you get to like the Rocky Mountains. And Thomas Jefferson was actually really disappointed in that. The manuscript map that Clark had made, that this was based off, was a little bit better. This map really ended up being more so, I guess, influential, and people just seeing that there was this whole, I guess, world out there that kind of influenced them to keep incrementally going west. But most of the people that moved west, it was kind of like one little bit at a time versus someone pushing all the way. So they didn't necessarily need, I guess, a lot of maps to keep going really far west. But I don't know, that is kind of a good question. I'm going to have to look deeper into it.
So they probably have blazed trails.
Yeah, Jefferson thought that this wouldn't really, I guess, be good enough for the scientific community. So he was a little bit disappointed with it. Even though, like, it's an impressive map, it ended up being really influential, I think most people would have been really impressed with the map. But I guess he was its strongest critic. He thought it was also, I guess, too small.
So, like, what I'm taking from it is these were, nice to haves, but not generally used for commerce.
I guess like as a more like a general reference, kind of like how you might use an atlas. Now, like some of them, like I didn't really show any here, like like Portland charts or something, or there were maps that are used for sailing that you could absolutely use. But a lot of these maps, they're not really detailed enough to keep going back and looking at. I mean, you probably could use some of these for if you came to a fork, like in a river. Then, if they get the angles right, then you could probably use it then.
But you have to have one.
You would have to have one. You would have to have one. And what's funny is like some of the atlases that were made, some go for like over 6 figures nowadays. But back then, it would have cost more than it does now because they absolutely had to have it. So even though they're so expensive now, they would have been even more expensive back then.
Wow.
Yes.
I understand Jefferson delayed releasing the information from the Lewis and Clark expedition. Is there some reason for that?
You said who was delaying it?
Jefferson delayed releasing the information from the Lewis and Clark expedition. Basically sat on it for a while.
From my understanding, maybe he did delay some, but from my understanding, that he had gotten frustrated because it was taking so long. I don't know. I've heard that he had gotten frustrated with, I guess, Lewis because I guess he was battling depression, and then he was appointed to the. I'm not sure. I've heard that maybe he thought that it wasn't up to the level that he thought it was supposed to be. I remember him maybe trying to send it to somebody to try to correct some coordinates or something like that to touch him up. I'll have to go back, or I can talk to you later about it.
Yeah, I thought that was part of why Lewis' depression later to death.
Yeah, I've heard like a few different theories on it that maybe he was depressed, like for one, because he never did find the Northwest Passage. And then Jefferson had said, well, part of the why he wasn't depressed then was because he was always on the move and worried about his survival. And when he got back home, he just wasn't meant to sit in an office. But no, I'm not familiar with that. Yes. Jameson.
Lewis, I understand, had a lot of emotional problems, and he delayed his writing, and he probably committed suicide, but he had a lot of emotional problems, and he couldn't get down to drawing the maps, turning information in, and didn't know it like he should have. That was a major problem.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well. And Jefferson said that he felt like it was inherited to an extent from his father, that his father had major depression issues as well, or I guess what he had called it was like chronic melancholy. Yes.
How many surveyors were on the team?
So, from my understanding, it was essentially just Lewis and Clark were the only ones that were doing the surveying. Yeah.
So whatever instrumentation they had, they carried.
Yes. Yeah, and because there were, I know that Jefferson had sent Lewis as well to get some training. I can't remember what the name of the professor was. He had sent him to go get some training beforehand, and then Clark had already done some mapping beforehand in the Army, and that was part of why he asked him. That he was actually the more skilled of the two. So, yes.
The technology they were using was all celestial, wasn't it?
Yeah, from my understanding, I can't say I'm like super knowledgeable on the technical parts of it, but I from my understanding that it was, to get their longitude and latitudes.
Yeah.
Yes. Any other questions?
Did any of those maps have the different forts that were in the wilderness area, like Fort Trial, which is located here?
I don't think any of them are detailed enough. This is probably, I wish there was another map like John Henry's here of when like Henry County was Henry County, because it had the court, this one actually has the courthouses on it. But not that I'm aware of, not until, I guess, later maps, maybe sometime in the 19th century. was it detailed enough? I haven't seen one
Because
before
that
trial.
was there for Washington
Yes,
visit.
I haven't seen one. I've tried to look through, I guess 18th, 19th century maps to try to find some of those things, and I haven't seen one with Fort Trial on it. But doesn't mean there's not one out there. But I haven't seen one from like the Revolutionary era or anything. So. Any other questions? All right. Well, this concludes my presentation. If anybody wants to, I brought some maps.
Thank you, Zach. And Zach has brought some maps back here in the back. Take a minute to look at them if you can. We put all of our presentations on YouTube. We have our own YouTube channel. Sometimes it takes from a week or two to get out there, but eventually they all get out there so you can share these with your friends. Come and see what we've got.
Zach, is it true, did I read correctly, you are related to
Oh.
Jefferson?
Yeah, I guess I didn't mention that. Peter Jefferson's brother, Phil Jefferson, is one of my ancestors.
Did you discover that on Ancestry?
I didn't. I'd already known that from the family prior, but I did go on Ancestry.com at some point, and then it was only a few clicks. Okay, I guess that.
Well, we look forward to seeing you again.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.